Yes, some income for the Guildhall.
Sorry?
For income for the Guildhall, for renting out the
Yes, I know, but there's a legal issue that all meetings should be accessible.
Okay, councillors,
And it's not.
can we start please?
It's not.
Can we start the meeting? So thank you all for attending this meeting of the Finance and General Purposes Committee. The date is the 20th of November. So the agenda is as follows. Item 1 is apologies for absence received.
No apologies have been received.
Second is declarations of interest. To receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest from members in respect of business to be transacted on the agenda. Any? Okay. Item 3 is minutes of the Finance and General Purposes Committee held on the 16th of October 23. Consider any matters arising from those minutes not covered elsewhere in this agenda. Attachment 1. Any comments first of all? Councillor Zoom.
Yeah, just a couple of things in terms of outstanding actions. I'll just reel them off. I'm not necessarily expecting the answer instantaneous, Karen, but business continuity plan. I did draft one back in June, but it's not resurfaced, so I'm just flagging that up. It is an outstanding action. Report on the play areas was expected. There we go. Wow, there's the rocket. Report on the play areas, that's outstanding as well. STC assets register was going to be submitted to this meeting, but it's not. There was also going to be a further letter to ex-town councillor Friend to close the old STC Facebook page. I don't know if that's happened. And then finally, we're expected to have a rolling action list from this meeting onwards for the event.
So I think instead of these items being in the minutes, there should be an attached action list which goes forward from one meeting to the next until they're crossed off.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on the minutes?
Yeah. Can I just check? I may have misunderstood. 1023.8, draft terms of reference for committees. Are they coming back to this committee, or is the intention they get circulated to the whole council before for final discussion? I wasn't quite sure what we'd agreed upon, and I thought they were coming back to this committee. I could be, could be wrong, of course.
I'll have to check that with the town clerk, I'm afraid. I don't know what her intention was when she wrote this, as she was at that meeting. So I'll check and I'll get back to you.
That's great, thank you.
I think we discussed at a previous meeting that we were slightly out of sync with the programme, and the idea is that the minutes come back here first before they go to the council. Otherwise it's then coming back to us. And
Exactly, that should be the correct method.
Sorry, I think it was my understanding that there's a whole set of committees, for instance the HR committee and so forth, that the terms of reference for those committees haven't yet been published, and it's my understanding that the town clerk is going to publish a number of these terms of references for the full council meeting next week.
Okay. I think it highlights the fact that we do have too many meetings. It's been going on for some time, that we need fewer, more higher quality meetings.
I'm glad that Councillor Green has said that they're all coming together, because I think one of the things we have to do is look at where there are repetitions and overlaps between committees, and it's just possible that there will be, because each set has been developed independently. So I think it's very important that we look at them all together as a council.
I'd like to recommend acceptance of the minutes with the amendments or requests made by Councillor Tuker.
Seconded by Councillor Zuka. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Next item 4 is public participation, a 20-minute session for members of the public to make representations at the meeting in respect of business on the agenda. Representation should not exceed 5 minutes. Do we have any?
No, we don't.
None? Okay, no any. Item 5 is the first draft of budget for 24/5. Members to receive and consider a report from the RFO, including the first draft of the proposed budget for 24/25. Comments and feedback welcomed. To progress to second draft. The RFO recommendations are that members consider if there are any other changes required to the draft budget. The committee will meet in December to further consider and approve 24/25 budgets, and that if budgets cannot be approved in December, then a meeting is scheduled for mid-January to approve the 24/25 budgets prior to the precept demand deadline. And I think it's clear that this is just a first stab at the budgets for next year. We have 2 months or more to come to a final conclusion, so I think Karen will talk on the budget and then we can ask questions and discuss as we go through.
Yeah, obviously we're meeting with the Talbot Fund later, so just to explain that all 3 budgets sort of interlink, and the way I build the budgets, I build them with the current forecast in mind. So the forecast changes on a monthly basis, it can change on a daily basis, and the forecast is in my spreadsheet here, giving a balance at the bottom, which is then carried forward into the new budget as part of the budget. So it can be quite tricky to get a good, accurate forecast, but that's what I'm aiming for. Going through the budgets, I've listed in my report the main changes, additions and deletions, that sort of thing, on the front page of my report. I've also done an additional bit of paperwork here just to explain that looking at the last 2 budgets, when you compare this budget that I proposed to 2 years ago, it's just an addition of £9,000. But if you compare it to last year's budget, you're actually looking at a deficit of nearly 40 grand. And the main reason for that deficit is that there is less carry forward from this financial year forecast than there was from the previous one. There was a figure of 122 carried forward, and there's only 60 expected to be carried forward, so that's quite a big chunk. So that's not listed in my report. It's just one of those things, but it would obviously be part of the forecast for this year. And I don't know the reasons behind that large carry forward that we had, but it would be a combination of things, including the end of the pandemic, when we had a lot of underspend, and that's rolled forward into that year. So yeah, there's a few things.
And it's my understanding that it includes your general contingency of 40,000 and another contingency, so there's about £50,000 of contingency in that money.
There's the brought forward figure, and there's the 40,000 operating reserve in the budget itself. But the main points that I wanted to show on this particular paper are that I was trying to make the decision to give back £20,000 to the Monkswell Nature Reserve, which was borrowed a few years ago. This may not be the right year to do it, or we might have to do it in 2 chunks. But I was attempting to do that. It has obviously added to the problem of the shortfall, and the reason why I've ended up putting the precept up by 10% in my illustration. If I go back to the budget, there are additions and deletions all the way down, and things are going up and down slightly, but overall the budget is going to be lower than it was the previous year, for the reasons that I've already described. The other reason is that I'm not expecting the key toilets to have much income in this forthcoming year, so that's been taken out. So the income has reduced slightly from 446 to 407,000.
Sorry, can I just ask on that point then, so have you put any income in for the toilets?
I've only put a small amount of income in for shower usage.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah. I don't know actually whether that's going to be discussed again. But that's when I was talking to the town clerk, that was her feeling that what was it?
I think we might have just
Here,
asked
there.
it.
That it's gone down from 5,800 to 100.
Shall we go through the main assumptions or main things that Karen's highlighted in her report? Would that
I'd
be
like to
helpful?
start at the top.
Sorry?
I'd like to start at the top with the mayor's allowance.
Yeah.
Well, next year, a lot of people might not realise we're a head port, and there's 14 sync ports, including us, and next year the speakership comes to Sandwich, so there'll be additional cost to the mayor, and he'd be expected to visit the other 13 ports, plus our liberties, which he normally does as well. So I don't think that's enough. I mean, 2,500, let's get reduced to 2,000. I don't think that's enough. And also they'll be doing the civic service, speaker civic service. And
True.
I checked the Speakers' Day budget for 2017, which is when the last time it happened, and I looked at the expenditure for that year, and I also looked at the income that we received, because we had a couple of events, I believe, and for both of those events we had contributions to meals and things. So overall, the net budget was less than the overall expenditure budget because of that income coming in. That's why you might not think it's as high as it should be, because that is the net result of.
I'd rather see extra in the budget, and then a shortage, and then you have to borrow it from other allowances, which happens every year.
What is the Speaker's Day? That's before my time.
Oh yeah. Well, it's where each sync port goes round all the sync ports, and then you take it on, and then you have to hold an actual Speaker's Day where they all come here. But yeah, I think I'll back up what Jeff's saying. I think that's a quite conservative figure, because if that was 2017, that's quite a long time.
I've added 20%.
Oh yeah, but I mean, I'm just wondering whether, I mean, I would rather
Have extra,
have extra, and then if it's not used, then it could be.
It's 5,000 with the Speaker's Day.
Yeah, but it's just it's
13 places plus 3 of
that's
ours,
it.
15.
Yeah.
Well, can we ask Karen to have a look at that? Perhaps?
Yeah,
Tweak it.
yeah.
So I'm just going through her covering report, item by item.
Sorry, just while you're mentioning kind of events, I've kind of heard talk of us recognising volunteers and having a volunteers day, and I don't know if there's anything in the budget for that while we're talking about civic events and so forth.
I spoke to the mayor about this the other day because it was one of the election issues, and I think something is planned for February, March next year, where we can have a bit like the curfew bell in
Yeah.
supper where we can just invite volunteers along and
Yeah.
have a
Is
meal.
it
and a few
budgeted?
drinks.
So we usually,
I didn't know about that, so no, sorry.
Oh.
I've got these things
I've
in.
told the town clerk
currently.
about this.
We're talking
Yeah, I
about
did.
1,000 perhaps maximum.
I spoke to the town clerk about
Okay.
this, and because originally, just so
Museum
Councillor Breen knows,
volunteer, yeah.
it's usually held in October. It's an event that's held every year, held in October. It obviously stopped during the COVID period, and it was always a time when all the volunteers in the town were recognised. They were all brought together, and there was a just like a buffet and drinks, and perhaps some recognition of their service. So.
I've called it the cocktail party. That's because I couldn't remember what else it was called.
Oh, right, well, that's what it is.
What
That's what it
traditionally
is.
It used to be
That's,
called.
yeah.
And we used to have it
Yes.
in roughly April or May.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
different.
no,
Different
so it
from
should have been
the,
October, and then the town clerk said that.
Not the male cocktail,
It was-
it's the,
No.
it used to be called museum volunteers.
The museum
Volunteers
volunteers
evening, yeah, that's the
Yes.
one.
But anyway, the town clerk
So you've got that.
refused to have it in October,
Yeah.
and she said there's no way I
Too
can
busy.
organise it in October. She said
Oh.
because there was a peace memorial festival,
Yes.
and then there was remembrance,
Okay.
and there was just too much workload. So
So this is for particularly just for the museum volunteers.
volunteers.
Oh,
I
all
think-
volunteers.
Yeah, I think
I
it's-
think it's all volunteers.
It's all
Yeah,
volunteers.
it's all volunteers.
Yeah.
All the organisations in the
Oh,
town,
okay.
I mean,
No,
the
no,
Sandwich
that's
and
different.
Bloom, for example, needs.
Gays and Souls and
I think you're getting confused here, Mr Chair, because I think every year the mayor did fundraising and he gave his thing out on the mayor's cocktail party, and that's when all the volunteers came to the mayor's cocktail. I think you're talking about the volunteers just like the Guildhall, aren't you?
Yeah.
Well,
True for.
Or you're going to go back,
the town clerk said to amalgamate the
you
two
go into
events.
the mayor's cocktail party.
Yeah, so it's to amalgamate it into one event.
Yeah.
So instead of having the two, having one in October and one in the spring, so the cocktail party would be in the spring, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying the volunteers were probably helping out at the cocktail party, serving the food and the drinks. Come to the party, you're working.
So anyway, it's the amalgamation of two events to save money. So instead of having two events, one in October and one in early in the year, spring, it's now going to be amalgamated into one event in the spring. The town clerk said that would be perfectly okay. I believe the assistant town clerk was asked to get started on it, and it will be in February. We're hoping for it to be in the February time, and then there'll be a recognition. And we're working on several different things for the volunteers, so it's not just that they turn up and they get a sandwich and a cup of tea or something like that. There's other things that we're working on.
I think my main concern is that there's budgetary provision in for
Yeah.
it.
we could consider seeking sponsorship for that as well. I think, so can we carry on through this, because I think there's a danger of,
Yeah,
and
and
then
getting too
budgets,
deep. Yeah.
Parkinson's law of inverse, whatever it is, about spending too much time on small things and ignoring the big things.
Could I just suggest that we take the name cocktail party out, because
Yes.
that does
It's
set the
not
wrong
right,
image.
it's
I
a-
appreciate it's the historical.
Volunteers.
Thank you.
Event.
I'll take it out then.
Okay, next one is addition of councillor training budget. Presume everyone's happy with that.
Yeah, that's very important.
Reduction in staff costs by reducing staffing contingency and staff recruitment budgets. It's okay.
Is that is assuming that, you know, no mishaps happen, isn't it really? But,
We've got, I can speak on that just briefly, the contingency and staff recruitment budgets. I've asked the town clerk to cross-train all the staff. So if any of the staff are off ill or anything like that, then the other staff can cover for them, so they're all being cross-trained. So, and a lot of the recruitment is, most of the recruitment we've done up to now has all been in-house. So apart from advertising vacancy, there's been the use of professional services from the council. So we're saving money for the public there as well on those two.
So next is reduction in office expenses and IT expenses budgets. Which is,
Yeah.
it's,
It's quite substantial.
2,000. Yeah.
Yeah, that's because we had £4,000 in there for office redecoration. That hasn't been done, but I've just removed it.
Is that something the caretakers could do?
The caretakers already did do it.
So, okay, but you're happy with the state decoration?
There are, did you leave any money in at all for that? Because there are some items that do need the blinds and other items, so it's best not to leave that budget completely flat.
We have got the Guildhall repairs and maintenance budget, which we use for elsewhere in the building. It's just particularly the office.
Because there was supposed to be refurbishment of carpets and blinds for the offices. And so
We had new carpets.
You've had those,
recently.
have you?
We had new blinds about 4 years ago. Though mine's falling down.
yeah, no, that's okay.
But yeah, I don't think anything drastic needs doing.
Okay, right. Thank you. Next
Okay, the next one is visitor assistance. That's good, going well, I think.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, I instructed the town clerk about that because we almost missed out,
Yeah.
and because I knew what happened in previous years, I said that should continue, and that is a great benefit. And if anybody wants to see, the visitor assistant is keeping a manual record of all the people she interacts with for tourism purposes.
Next is open spaces and properties, reduction. And there's 5 different headings there. Black Lane, Donkey Paddock, War Memorial, Fishergate and Bay Hall. Any comments on those?
I'm going to come back on comments at the end if that's okay. Fine.
I'm not clear why Bay Hall is crossed out, because that's.
Bay Hall. Bay Hall is a ring-fenced set of monies that have come into the council. So unless we decide that we're going to add extra budget, it is sort of its own pot.
This one is Monk's Wall, which we discussed earlier.
Yeah, this was something I discussed with a responsible financial officer, and I mean, morally we should be paying this back because it was taken from a ring-fence budget and it shouldn't have been. So it's important to go back, but I don't know, as the finance officer said, whether it's better to actually pay it back over 2 years or 1 year. It just depends on their need. If they had a need for the entire budget to go back, then
So
we
if it was
should do it.
over 2 or 4 years, then we increase our.
So I've got some specific comments which I'll bring at the end, but on this individual issue, what is the demand for that money to be returned? So is there a need, is there an urgency to return it? Because if not, we have an administration for 4 years. I would suggest we do it each year over the 4 years, and we therefore consume the cost in a sensible manner, because it does distort this year's budget by doing it one lump sum.
Indeed.
So we'd have 15,000 extra next year.
No, 5,000 5,000 for each of the 4
Each of
years.
the 4 years, yeah.
But 5,000 paid back next year.
Do we know if there's any urgency for these funds?
I know there's a project at Monk's Wall, but I think it's going to be the case that they spend the money and then get a grant funding back, and that
Yeah,
should
that's what I
100%
Yeah.
cover that project. So I believe it's not urgent.
So the principle's right, and I think if we make the commitment, we'll do it, because if not, we'll just push it back. So why don't we do it
That's,
apportioned over the team's administration?
yeah, 5,000 each year over the 4 years, yeah, that's ideal.
Shall we vote on that proposal?
Yeah,
Seconded.
I'll second that.
All in favour? So there, you have a clear steer on that.
That's it.
Okay. Next one is STC contribution to the Guildhall accounts. Any comments on that?
Well, yes, I would like to comment about that, either now or later at the end, but I mean, I have a general comment. I raise this every time, the last 3 years I've been councillor and discussed this. I've never really got to grips with this contribution which is made partly by the council, partly by the Toll Bridge Fund, to cover the loss the Guildhall make. I've never really understood how it is divided between the council and the Toll Bridge Fund. And also I know, Karen, that you've reduced the 25% contribution of all the utilities in the Guildhall by a substantial sum from 14,000 to 8,500. Surely with the present cost of utilities, why are we able to show such a reduction for the budget for next year?
That's been calculated using my forecast for the heating, lighting, water and rates for the Guildhall, and we did make a saving having a new boiler. That made a big difference, and so I have done a detailed exercise on the Guildhall budget. Yes.
And I still have this query as to how the contribution to all the Guildhall loss are divided between the council and the Toll Bridge Fund. You reduced the Toll Bridge Fund contribution from 65,000 to 45,000, and you reduced the council's from 113,000 to 90,000. Now maybe the Guildhall make less of a loss this year, which is fine, but I still query the differential between what the Toll Bridge Fund pays and what the council pays.
I'm trying to honour the decision that was made by council a few years ago to increase the precept by 25% in order to take the pressure off the investments to run this building. I would have wanted to stick around the 100,000 mark, but this budget's so tight, I've made it less. But that's what I'm trying to do, is honour that approval that was, the decision that was made.
And somebody has to pay for this loss. So if either the Toll Bridge Fund pays or the council pays, which means the electors and residents pay through the precept. And I just do not know how or is equitable, how it should be divided. It's an insoluble problem which can't go on, because if it carries on year in, year out.
I think the working group is...
There are complaints about the performance of the Toll Bridge Fund, a lot of which is due to the fact that they're having to dip into their capital to make their contribution.
I think the working group that's their key.
Well, I hope the working group
Councillor Green and Carlton.
That's exactly right. We are looking into this, and I think one of the big things that I want to shed some clarity about is the staffing costs, because the overall staffing costs are significant, and how they are apportioned through to the different funding sources needs to be really clear. And I think in this 90,000, we're kind of covering costs of caretakers and so forth in that. Am I right, Karen? Does that include caretakers and insurance and all sorts of things?
The Toll Bridge Fund pays for its own salaries, so the elsewhere in the budget there will be in the Toll Bridge Fund budgets and the Guildhall budgets there will be a salary line. So this is not really supporting salaries staff as such, because that amount is already apportioned to the Toll Bridge Fund. They are already paying for their salaries. This is an additional 25, or it was an additional amount trying to honour the decision by council to increase the contribution.
Yes, I want to go back. So if we finish talking about this particular issue, because I think the chair's eye skipped over the disability access strategy, which has had its budget reduced.
That's that's not in, so I'm just going through the covering report at the moment.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
okay, I'm looking at okay.
So the covering report covers the main
Yeah.
changes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so can I now mention the discussion?
Well, can we go on to that once we've been through this?
Sorry.
So the next thing was the market manager, which is now within the assets officer role. So, and the key conveniences and the visitor information centre income streams. Is that all okay?
Yeah, that's.
So those are the main things, and I think we're happy with all of those, apart from the Monks Wall, which we voted on, and I mean, now Councillor Zuka has various.
So I've got a slightly different approach.
Okay.
Okay, so I think it's key that we demonstrate an evidence-based approach to what we do. We've already had some suggestions of additional monies. Karen has said it's a very tight budget. She's illustrated a 10% increase, and we're starting from a tight position on this. I think the approach that we take is critical because there are a number of detractors out there that have already started criticising the current council in its very short term for not managing the money. We know who those people usually are, and they're the same people that will make a lot of noise about this. I want to make sure there's no unanswered questions in terms of the budget. So I think we should be starting from a zero-based position on each line, and Karen can easily answer some of those in terms of these things are critical, these things are unavoidable, and these are the things that we're adding in. And we should be able to apply that to each line. And therefore we've got a very clear story about how we've arrived at the top figure. Because what I'm worried about is suggestions that an amount isn't enough and we just have to put a bit more in there, because actually we haven't got the money to start with. So that's my personal view around this. Colin, you mentioned about the presets, it's only a very small amount, but actually if DDC also increases the cost on residents, they will just look at one figure and how it impacts them. So I think, and this is a process we're going through, so this isn't a one-hit wonder today. I think we've got time, Karen, in my opinion, but you might argue against it, is to actually be able to justify each of those lines. And some of them will be straightforward. You've got to pay them, and you'll know that they're right. But there are also some good examples of where figures have just jumped dramatically without any breakdown behind it.
I have various breakdowns of the
brilliant.
options. As we
Which
can
I
see, I
can't-
have many tabs here.
Which I can't myself justify why something might move 100% up.
No.
I can't. And I want to be able to do that because I'm going to be asked to approve a budget, as everybody else is. I picked out a few items along those lines. Some of them have been picked up already, so I don't want to go over the same ground. But, and this isn't, these are just things to call out, because I've got a number of comments, I'm not going to go through them all. It's like election expenses, there's a line in there. Is that predicated on the basis that we will expect some councillors to not be imposed in the year, and therefore we do an election? Because actually my starting point would be co-opting, so that might be a consideration. We've got salary costs. I don't know the breakdown of that salary cost.
I have got an entire spreadsheet of salary costs broken down a million ways.
Job
I'm
roles.
not allowed to have this in this
And
meeting. That has to go to an HR or personnel subgroup meeting, whatever. Meeting we have.
So it's identifying what the job roles are that match
Yeah.
against
Yeah.
that total
Everything is
budget.
fed
I
into
don't want to
that.
see what people's salary incomes, but I'd like to know what the job roles are that sit within that. Others might disagree with it, and that's fine, but this is my view on it. So the HR and payroll forecast for this year is nearly twice the approved budget I don't know the explanation for that. There will be one. So it's just really going through all of those, Karen, in the sense of what's the breakdown, what's the argument for the increase, and I'm particularly looking at the increases.
Yeah.
So that's my.
I think we need to be careful as councillors to talk about increases in staffing being a concern, and then putting more and more work on the staff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we can surely justify the number of staff we've got. That's not the issue, but the fact is that people outside will have a perception, and we need to use Councillor Zuka's view, which is this is the basis for it. Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, that's okay. That's right.
So
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, they're very fine principles, but each year somebody has to set this budget, and each year if you overset it, you will be stoned, and if you underset it, you will be stoned. So for the last 2 years, we haven't put the precept up at all.
No.
But where's the compliments from anybody in keeping the precept down for the last 2 years? I didn't see any compliments coming in at all from the public or from the council or from anybody else. And Dover District Council had suggested that we should put some sort of precept increase in. So a lot of this, I know it's very difficult to comprehend, but a lot of this does rely on historical data. So although you're saying, oh, let's go for a zero-based budget, but a lot of it has to be based on historic data so that we actually know where we're going to peg any of these budgets.
That's fine, Paul, but at the start of this year, you should be able to say for each line item, we start at 0, and based on history, or based on what's happening next year, this is the figure we have to, there's a minimum built in, and if we want some luxury above that, then that's what we declare. But
sorry, I haven't finished quite fully now. But the other factor is, I mean, for instance, just things like the election thing. So if somebody does stand down and you wish to co-opt, if 10 people in the town say, no, we want an election, tough luck. You've suddenly got to have a budget to cover an election. So these things, I'm very reliant. I've spoken to the financial officer a couple of times to do with the budget now, and she's told me the amount of work she's put in and the exercises she's undertaken, and I've got full faith in what she's presenting.
So as evidence-based, Paul, if you had to run an election, how much would that cost?
£6,000.
Well,
Can I just make a comment?
From historical data, I'll go back to historical data to look that up.
But I don't have that in front of me.
No.
Can we have
No criticism meant.
Can we have Councillor Anderson?
Yes, because I went to the Kent Association of Local Councils AGM on Saturday, and there was a very interesting discussion because one of the parish councils had put up a motion that we should abandon by-elections, and it was roundly defeated. I spoke against it, and one of the arguments that was made was that all councils should have an insurance policy and put aside £6,000 as a minimum to make certain that they have enough money to carry out a by-election, because that amount, as I understood it, I stand to be corrected, is what is charged by the district council if we wish to hold an election. So we should have an insurance-based argument, not a principle about democracy and co-option and so on, but an insurance-based argument that we do need to put aside money for by-elections.
Sorry, could a couple of points if I may. Just on that specific point, we're carrying a £40,000 general contingency, so maybe that could be used. But I'd just like to go back to the precept, because the precept is our number one source of income, and that's been held constant. How many new houses have been built, Mr.
That's why it didn't go up.
That's why it didn't go up. Well, surely, if there are new houses built, they're receiving more council tax, and we should receive a reasonable increase in the overall amount of precept. I've got other questions about the precept, but I'd also just like to say we've got a working group. We've been charged with looking into some of these things, and I don't know how you can differentiate between what's critical and what's unavoidable and what is just kind of added in, because we're reliant on the town clerk to put in things based on kind of historical knowledge. And finally, if I may just say, the big expenditure that the town is incurring is in staffing costs, and we've seen a presentation earlier this year at full council where the total staffing cost is in the order of £400,000. So we just need to be clear right across how much of that is going to Sandwich Town Council, how much of it is borne by other budgets.
If I could just, 2 points. One is that in order to fund these things, you need a budget to begin with. If there's no budget, you're in trouble. But if you have a budget, if it's overspent, then such is life. But if you have reserves, then you can fiddle with those. But I looked at the figures for the precept. So the Band D precept for Dover is £2,109 a year. That's for everything: police, KCC, DDC, STC, etc. Of which £135 is for STC. So we're talking about a 10% increase. So for a Band D house, that's an extra £13 a year, which is 4 or 5 cups of coffee.
Do we know how many Band D houses there are?
Well, Band D is always taken as the kind of average. So, I mean, it is a difficult decision, but in the big scheme of things, it's not a big increase for a typical household. And the tax base in Sandwich is 2000 and something, 2027.
Yeah.
And clearly we've had another 100 or more houses built in the last year.
The only flip of that is that the preset that Sandwich has is the highest in the district out of 25 or so
It's the highest.
areas, and it's always one of the highest in the country.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back in terms of it being a small increase. We are already right at the top of
But
the list.
it depends what the other precepting authorities do, EDC, KC, because
The
if their increase is also 10%,
average.
we'll all get it in the neck.
The average.
Can we also bring in the financial officer?
£61.
Can we bring in the financial officer first? Because the question that Councillor Breen posed, I believe financial officer's got the answer on the precept.
Sorry, I was going to answer Councillor Anderson, because you mentioned election expenses.
I'm sorry.
The election expenses for this last election, the full election, was £5,078.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes.
And for a by-election, I would expect it to be quite a lot lower than that.
Okay, well, I think we need an insurance budget for a by-election. I don't think we should abandon by-elections.
There might be a couple between, maybe one next year.
Finance officer, did you have, there was a change in the precept, wasn't there, where you said there was, due to the new housing being built, I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
There was
I know we had an increased number of precepting houses in the town, which afforded us a few thousand, but not a huge amount.
No.
But it may have been up to about 10,000.
I thought it was
extra.
more than that. I thought it was
It
about
may have
40.
been, yes, it may have been about 40.
I thought it was around
Yes.
about 40,000.
Oh, 40. I don't think it was as
It's
much
about
as that.
20,000, assuming 150 houses, it'd be about 20,000.
I'm not sure.
We've
if it's
had
much
Montague
as that.
Place and Kumar, maybe a few others. I would say about 150.
Yeah, I don't think we can worry about the price of the precept, because if you look at Dover District and most of these little hamlets and parishes, this is our bugbear, isn't it, maintaining this building, and they have a parish hall which they rent out and they only have to see once a month and they don't employ any staff. I mean, we're talking about the staff wages, that's why it's so expensive. Whatever you pay for it, we get in that, it's the quality. I think we've got a very good quality staff here and a very good quality building, and unfortunately the people, the community has to pay for all the precept, or part of it, part of it.
Is there anything else on the covering report? Councillor Anderson wanted to raise the disability
I did,
working group.
but I just want to say, in relation to what Councillor Franklin has just said, I agree that this building and the staff, who are excellent, are a very large chunk of what we're asking the residents of Sandwich to pay for through the precept. But I do think that the other side of the argument that Councillor Chuka raised about how we're going to be attacked, and we know we will be for raising the precept if we decide to do that by 10%, is that we also need to demonstrate what services we are providing. That's the other side.
Exactly.
That's what people want to know. And I have to say that the Guildhall is wonderful, and people appreciate it, but they may also want other services as well, and we do have to focus on what we're actually offering the people of Sandwich who are paying £135 a year for us to do some work.
And just briefly, I'm sure Councillor Wiles, you remember this because I know you're ticking them off on Facebook posts, but when we had the annual town meeting, I stood up and I gave a list of the mandatory services that this parish council, really it's a parish council, should be undertaking, and then I read out a list of the services that we were actually undertaking, and the two were astronomically different. So basically this council should be maintaining allotments and just helping with toilets and bits and pieces like that, very, very minor things like that. But yet people come to us with a multitude of issues and problems that we sort out, from anything from supplying a venue for their wedding to helping them with the level crossing, you know, when there's problems with the level crossing. So this council is, I think we've all said, it's a very exceptional council, and you only really get what you pay for, this old adage. So
I mean, I think we can point to things that have improved over the past.
Indeed,
6
massively.
months.
And look at the savings we're making on the budget. Everything we've been talking about up till recently is we're making cuts or savings in the amounts that we've been talking about. Reduction. Apart from Speaker's Day, which is a traditional thing, most of them are actually reductions or amalgamating posts. So, and if you, one last thing, if you did look at it, if we had added 5% for each year, the last 2 years we would have added 5%, 10%, and this year it would have actually been an increase of 15% on the precept. So we're not doing that.
What's the current RPI?
It's
Yeah. So I wonder if there's so we've made a decision that we've made a decision that Monk's Wall will not be 20,000 but 5,000. So that means 15,000 extra in the budget for next year.
Next year.
Of which the increase overall is 27,000. So that's reducing it to.
Yeah, 12.
There are simple things. This is the things we. Karen, I have a number of questions. What I can do is if I play those to you, because I think there's still some opportunities that we're not covering in this, that if you look at me, you might say, actually, yes, that might be sensible. So if I play those to you, because it's a process, it's not one off today, and look at those.
So with that decision, can we say that there is scope to reduce the 10% increase to perhaps 6%? And fiddle around with the, you know, add a bit to the mayor, disability, etc.
I think if I may say, sorry, the 10% was going to be the worst case scenario. So that was going to be the worst case scenario. We're now all, as we should be, professional people. We're discussing that to see where we can bring that from that 10%. So that was the worst case scenario, and Councillor Tuker and all of us will all help to bring that down so that the precept is the least. We're going to promise the public that we're going to put the least amount
As
in.
long as we can explain it.
Exactly, I
For
agree.
me, if it's 10, 15, if it's 2%, it doesn't really matter. It's about the explanation rather than saying we've done the best we can.
Yeah.
Is there any scope within this? We've talked about income from other sources. Is there any scope for additional income?
There is. Before got to just start.
Yeah, so obviously with the, sorry to say again, but obviously when this assets manager comes in and they've done that baseline of where we are now and what can actually be worked with the assets that we've currently got, there will be an increased income, but obviously that is going to be, you know, sort of representative to the actual work that can be done over the year. So obviously it's going to be very minimal from April, from the start of the financial year towards the end of the financial year, and hopefully
I think realistically you're looking at the financial year beyond.
Afterwards,
Asset
indeed.
management post, doing what they need to do, generating the ideas to then
Exactly.
deliver against.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, disability access strategy. I'm loath in a way to raise the point that I am about to raise, and that is that the budget has been reduced by £500. Now, I think that's understandable, given that the disability access strategy has made no demands on the budget at all this year, because we haven't met. And there are a number of reasons as to why we haven't met. And I'm hoping that we will get going very soon. And I do expect that we will want to make some expenditure next year on, well, two projects that I have in mind, but that's up to the group to agree. One is continuing with trying to get a ramp through Ainsley Court, and I've absolutely no idea how much that will cost. And also now I understand there's a problem with access to the cattle market conveniences.
Yes.
So there will be expenditure. And I'm talking completely in the dark as to what is actually involved. But I would imagine it will be more than £2,000. And that's a problem. Now, I'm very happy to try and get outside funding, but I've absolutely no idea how to do that. And I will need help to do it. But I do think this council should actually be doing concrete things as well as worrying about the fabric and the staff. We should be making life better for people who live in this town and who visit this town. And that is one of the ways in which I'm hoping to do that. So I would say go back to the original budget of
They would be
£2,500.
capital items.
Yeah.
Sorry?
They capitalise, I mean,
Capital
Yes.
expenditure.
Yes.
where I've worked in the past, you have a capital budget and a revenue
Okay.
budget, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the cattle market toilets are actually the property of Dover District Council, so perhaps grants could be available, levelling up or whatever, for Dover District Council. But it's very difficult because the height, the length of the ramp, is it 1 foot every 12 foot? So I don't know, you can put a ramp in there unless it's really twirly one scenery. So
As we're talking about an alternative which is a lot cheaper, I'm not saying this is the solution, but I investigated, I spoke to Age Concern, and they said they would be happy for anybody who goes to those toilets and they need easy access, they can go in there. So you could just simply have a sign that says, if you're having trouble to access this facility, there is close by.
Well, this is the sort of thing, obviously, that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
no, it's
But
perfect,
what I'm saying is we need some money.
Yeah.
but there is
I think
perfect,
we will need money.
there is perfect disabled toilets in the co-op as well.
And that's exactly where I was going to go and speak as well. To the manager.
Yeah.
So could I make a proposal that we've got the 15,000 extra from the monks all in the pot, so to speak. If Karen could take that and maybe tweak the income figures a bit, add a bit more from different sources, and then come back to the next meeting with a revised budget, which has an increase in the precept of somewhere between around the 5%, 6%
There's a but.
mark. But
Can you be a bit more descriptive about which source is the income?
Yes.
What have you got in for next year for the forecourt?
It's 10,000.
10,000. So that's the market.
8,000 this
Yeah.
year.
We've just put 10,000 in, that is just a
Yeah.
shot in the dark.
So that's the market plus the events plus possible charges for chairs, tables.
Which is double what we're expecting this year, because the forecast for this year is just over
Yeah.
5,000.
So I think it's actually quite
Ambitious.
punchy already.
Well, the issue in part of the precept is also that inflation is still rampant, and I know the attraction of setting a lower precept, but if you're not actually matching inflation and inflationary costs, which include salaries, I think you're very rapidly going to get in a downward spiral again. So, whilst you may not fully hit inflation, you're going to have to take significant recognition of that. And I'm afraid everybody's stuffed with that one. That's one of the problems we've got with this very high levels of inflation.
What was the staffing settlement for?
I'm not sure that's come through yet.
Has it been agreed?
The NAMP
No.
settlement was something like £1,900 for the year.
One-off lump sum, is it?
Yes,
Average.
pro-rated over
Pro-
people's hourly
Hours.
hours.
So it was about 7%, something like that.
But you would factor that in, won't you, in terms
Yeah.
of...
I have factored
Yes.
out a slightly lower figure
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
because they, I have no experience of this, but my colleagues tell me that, and that's slightly higher than they would normally
Yeah.
be.
There was a lot of political pressure as well.
I'm sorry to keep banging on about it, but one area, you saved £50,000 by not paying one fall back. One area where you could reduce our expenses is by asking the Tunbridge Fund to pay 65,000 rather than 45,000 to all the bills of the fund. That would immediately reduce our expenses by £20,000. So I don't know how you how we deal with that.
Deal with it in the next meeting.
Yeah. But it is a serious, it would make a big difference.
But I think until the working group has concluded its
Agreed,
work, we can't really make such a decision.
agreed, it is very, I don't think we can.
Is there a timetable? When is the working group going to?
Well, 6 months is the,
6 months.
well, the working groups can last for
I
up to
know,
6 months.
I know, I read the rules.
It's your fault.
We would hope it would be sooner than that.
Sorry, in summary, we haven't answered your question, have we, Karen, as to where extra income is going to come from?
Well, should we stick with the 15,000 for now and see what
I
Karen
think so.
can do with that?
I've got a couple of suggestions that you might want to look at that might realise some more opportunities.
That's brilliant, but we don't want to be too ambitious,
No.
that's why I would just say, don't be
No,
too ambitious.
mine's not about generating money, it's about...
So are we happy for Karen to take the 15,000, tweak
Yeah.
the figures, add a bit for disability, perhaps for the mayor, and come back with a revised budget with a proposed increase of around the 5-6%?
But can I just say in finalising this, Councillor Black is very apt at what he's just said. We shouldn't worry about being slate. We didn't get any cakes or balloons or streamers for keeping the precept down for 2 years. Whichever way we put it, we're going to get brickbats, whichever way we put it. But we should be pegging it at least on an inflationary sort of figure, and it is extremely high. So I think that's probably one of the key factors to the whole thing. So before you say about, oh, can we try and get it down to 5%, let's get it to where the inflationary figure is, to try and keep level pegging.
The only thing is, we haven't finished the cycle. The inflation rate is dropping. I think it's 6.7 at the moment on CPI. By March next year, it almost certainly would have dropped even further. But that's just...
But that is only compared with 12 months ago.
Oh yeah, I
and
guess I know.
you
I know
the real cost
over the
of
last 3 years.
inflation.
Over the last
And
3 years.
we also need to keep, you talk about keeping in step, we need to keep in step with what Dover and Kent County Council are doing,
Yes,
and,
exactly.
and other
Manufacturers
councils,
of-
you know. There's no point in us suppressing our precept and then pushing ahead because it's only going to help mask the actual inflation rise that they are finding.
To some extent, this is about presentation, isn't it? I'm happy to put my head on the line and say, look, we're improving the town council and we're asking you to pay an extra £13 a year. You know, that's the message I would try and get
Pound a
across.
month.
Huh?
A £1 a month, basically.
£1 a month,
For all these
for an average
services.
household.
As long as you
But
can...
as Councillor Anderson said, we have to show that we're making a difference in the
Yeah,
town.
that's my point. You need to
With-
clearly demonstrate
With
the
allotments,
evidence.
with
Yeah.
phone boxes and
Free loos.
events, loos.
Free
Yeah,
loos.
exactly, the toilets, the free
Yeah.
toilets.
Yeah.
It's a big change.
What are
So,
we giving free loo for?
Are we agreeing
As
then?
we can.
Are we
Yeah,
agreeing
so
then?
yeah, I'd second that if we.
My
if,
proposal is we ask Karen, take
Yes.
15,000, come back
Yeah.
with a tweaked budget
And see what that,
See
see
how
what
it
that
works.
delivers
See
rather
what
than.
of around the 5-6%.
See what it
We'll
delivers.
see what the financial officer comes up
We
with.
have a second for that?
So I second
And
that.
please consult your colleagues in the other councils to see which direction their wind is
Yeah.
blowing.
Very good point.
Unfortunately, they're very slow at
Yeah,
letting us
they're
know.
terrible.
You're talking March.
Yeah.
Sorry, all in favour of that, so we have unanimous decision on that, thank you. Good, so that was a useful discussion, wasn't it? And it's, if we are making an increase, it's probably better to do it now than in 3 years' time when it's harder.
Not politicians.
No, true. Okay, the next item is item 6, proposal to outsource payroll. Receive a report from the town clerk with a proposal to outsource the preparation of payroll for staff employed by STC and SDBF. 3 quotations have been sought and are made available, and this is something we have discussed in the past.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I've discussed this with the town clerk myself, and this is what the town clerk did where she was previously employed, and she said it is the best professional practice to be undertaken. As stated, it's very difficult to say this, but obviously we've got somebody who's undertaking the payment of their own salary currently, and as the town clerk said, you know, nobody should be, this council should not be putting any employee in a position where there could be any suspicion put on them whatsoever, and that shouldn't be, we shouldn't be putting anybody in that position. And I was in the same position with the technology school, and the technology school likewise had outsourced the payroll there, and it's for the amount that we will be paying, based on say the lowest quotation, you know, we're going to get a lot of extra services with no due respects to anybody that's doing it currently, but who will be maintaining and keeping up with current legislation and regulations, and it will be done, and it will take a workload off of the staff that are doing it currently. So the staff that are doing it currently can then put their professional abilities to other financial
it makes absolute
requirements.
sense.
So I would propose we do go ahead with the quotation.
Councillor Black.
I'll endorse Councillor Carter said. It frees up staff resource time to do the things that town councils do, and we shouldn't be doing payroll. We shouldn't be doing pensions.
Agreed.
So I think it's a sound proposal.
Yeah.
However, couple of questions. We've got 3 quotes in from companies that are based quite far away from here, so I'd like to know how we've sourced these as possible suppliers, because one's in Dewberry, one's in Swindon, one's in Glenroth. Having looked at them as companies, they're micro companies in best respect, so they're quite small. There is a risk attached to delivery, so I want to make sure that we have some element of business continuity there, because the worst thing to do is, it's right to pass it, I think, to pass it out, but then the worst thing to do is then it fails. So I'd like to know what security we've got around their delivery, and also that have we checked their credit rating as well. I think they're quite long-standing companies, at least 2 of them I sourced, but just these sort of things, because payment of salaries is a critical item, and we don't want to get it wrong. So I just want to be assured, because actually if you look at the 3 quotes we've got in, if you took a very generous view in terms of the number of hours, the lowest quote suggesting 3 days effort a year, that seems extremely low. And the biggest one, the highest quote, would suggest 11 days effort a year. Now it was suggested as 20% of your time, or somebody's time. If that's true, I don't know how 20% suddenly becomes 3 days effort in a year.
Because this is, you use a payroll software. Once you set up, just press a button. There's only 10 staff. I do payroll. 10 people. I can do them in 5 minutes. As long as if you've been set up correctly.
And that's good to
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
None of that's within the
Yeah,
report,
yeah,
and that's why I'm
understand
asking
that,
the
yeah,
questions. But there is some manual transactions around pensions, etc.
Yeah,
alongside that,
and
and that might take it up to 3 days. But so there's some assurances, Karen, I'm looking around this. But I think it's a sound proposal that we do outsource it. Well, I don't want to go to the wrong company and fall over.
So could we ask Karen just to answer that question and then perhaps to summarise the 3 bits so that we can understand we're comparing like with like?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I just wanted to assure Councillor Duker exactly what Councillor Mrs Carter has said. When it's all been set up, and you'll see there are implementation costs for setting this up, unless there are any variances, it is literally a push of a button. And if you think about that, even at the minimum of 3 days a year, so what's that, 72 hours, divide that by 12 months, gives you an idea of how long it would.
But then there's things like overtime or expenses.
So that's why I said variances. Apart from variances, there will be some variances, but also there'll be a clear audit trail, and there will be, we can ask for metrics from this as well, because the software that they will be using, we will be able to get metrics from it as well. I think it's an excellent idea.
When you answer the proposals, can you just please explain who has the money? Are we paying the payroll company, or the payroll company are just instructing the numbers for our bank to pay?
The one thing is, if they're already working in a local authority sector, particularly small ones, they're going to have economies of scale, and it's not going to be the way that we have to do it. Is okay, let's just double check that it's time and a half, it's not time and 3/4. You do have far more economies of scale, assuming they're in the correct sector, and we check that, and they seem to have a fair amount of customers in that.
Although one of the companies did look like it's only got two people.
That's a fair point. So you've got leave cover, sickness cover, and everything else. I don't disagree with your reservations.
So could we ask Karen to just talk about the assurance that you're happy with the, you know, that they're safe and above board?
How they were found.
And then give if you can, a comparison of the 3 quotes. So what we're looking at is an annual figure, so that comparing like with like.
Yeah, and also.
Can you do that now?
and also how it works, because I assume you'll just pop in the times allocated for people on a weekly or a monthly basis.
I'll tell you what time now, which is not very much. Jill sourced, the town clerk, sourced all 3 of these. I don't know the companies myself. I know that Jill is familiar with one of them through her past employer. So I believe that she has tried and tested one of them, and the other 2 I cannot speak for. I would say that from my point of view, there'll still be an element of payroll for me, because I will be collating time sheets. Before I did payroll, I've done payroll for 3 years, I think. Prior to that, we used Capita. And I told them what to pay us, checked by the town clerk obviously. All the extra bits such as overtime calculated by myself. They would fill in pension forms and things like that. I'm obviously currently doing everything. I'm currently paying HMRC, I'm currently paying pensions, I'm currently completing the software system Sage and iConnect for pensions. So even just to take a good chunk of that out is a good thing on my behalf, and actually going back to what the Mayor said about me paying myself is not a good thing. I've not been happy to be solely in charge of this, and
So I think we need to agree this in principle, but defer it to the next meeting with a full covering report showing how the companies were selected, that we've got assurance that they're bona fide and a proper, table showing comparisons between, are we comparing like we like, so we're getting the same service from each one, or if not, that we can see that
quite
clearly,
different in
and what the
cost.
annual cost is or the monthly cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah, and can we be clear as to who's actually holding and making the monetary payment? Are the wages coming from, say, Capita, or are they coming from Sandwich Town Council?
Okay, all those in favour?
Yep.
Is that okay? Right, next item is interim audit report from internal auditors Mulberry and Co. Attachment 4. They visited the Guildhall on the 10th of November to undertake an interim period audit to consider the governance and accounts using samples where appropriate, covering the entire year to date. Members are asked to note the report, which will be on the agenda for council on the 27th of November. So, any comments on this?
Just briefly, I discussed this with the town clerk, and she said that Mulberry were excellent. She said it was a very good choice to go with them, and she said they'd picked up a number of items that they hadn't considered before, and just trying to see where I put that. I've made some notes somewhere, but she said that they have been exceptional, and some of the items that had not ever been considered before or picked up have been picked up by Mulberry, and she said she was really, really pleased. She said it was an exceptional report back from them of what they'd undertaken, so she was really pleased with the results.
I think the key thing in the covering letter, we did not uncover any errors or misstatements, nor did we identify any significant weaknesses. The systems are fit for purpose, and it's not indicative of any significant failings, but rather a pointers to improving upon an already well-ordered system. There was one thing it made me slightly surprised, where it says there has been no instance of high staff turnover. Maybe we've changed.
Well, not in terms of the responsible finance officer, I think we're all very grateful that she went through a very sticky.
But generally this seemed like a positive.
Yes. I'd like to propose that we accept this report, but also congratulate the responsible finance officer on
Here. Second that.
because I do think it's an excellent report, and given what we've been through, I think it's particularly special.
Were you happy with the way they conducted themselves?
Yes, I thought he was very, very thorough and very knowledgeable about what he should be checking. So I was very impressed with
As I read the report, there were a number of recommendations, like increasing the financial level for the town clerk, the frequency of the VAT returns, signing off the bank statements, and spreading our cash so it's not all in one. And how are these suggestions and recommendations going to be implemented?
Well, the first one, we're going to address the town clerk's delegated powers of expenditure. She has quite high delegated powers of expenditure for some things, but not everything. And it enables her to sign off things mid-month, but not everything. So she finds it quite restricting. So she will be addressing that. We will be addressing that with a report to council. The nil value items in the asset register, they've never been. I've never been picked up on that by internal or external audit for the last 9 years. Which is extraordinary, really.
Yeah.
But then there's this pound difference, so I shall change that. We need to reinstate a chairman or a designated councillor to check the bank statement against the income expenditure statement every month. So we used to do this prior to the pandemic, and it's sort of fallen by the wayside. So we need somebody to be designated to do that.
Yeah, I had actually discussed that with the town clerk last week, and she said she was looking for somebody with reconciliation experience, and I, not having any connection personally, but Councillor Mrs Carter has done that on a large number of occasions for.
No, I don't do every day. My
Well,
work.
you do it currently, but you've done it.
All my jobs.
Talk myself into a job.
So are we happy to note, yes?
So I
Yeah.
was the last point. Do you want me to try
Oh,
the last point?
Yes.
Yeah, I've already discussed with the auditor that half of the money in the town council account is actually Maddox Fund, and my suggestion would be to use a different bank. Once we get that charity set up, we can move that fund into a different bank, and that would halve the liability for the town council. And then obviously the threshold for financial risk is 85,000 per bank. Then we have to make a decision whether we want to split our town council bank account 3 ways.
I think that's the safest.
Yeah, I
isn't it?
don't think there's a problem with the Tollbridge Fund, because I'm drawing down as and when required.
Yeah.
There may be at the very beginning of the year, but certainly not halfway through and onwards. But yeah, so there will be a report written about those items.
Okay.
Excellent.
Happy to note the.
Yeah.
Everyone in favour?
Are we not?
Congratulations also.
Exactly.
RFO.
Yes.
Write your own.
Don't add any zeros to your salary.
Okay, date and time next meeting, 11th of December at 6:30. So now we do the Tollbridge